I guess the point that I would make in all of it is chaos theory is interesting, but I can assure you that logistics on the battlefield, or logistics where a natural disaster has occurred, you will never have resources equal to requirements. And that's really what I think we need to talk about, understand, and perhaps develop a methodology in terms of how we go forward. Next slide, please. And by the way, it says Lieutenant General retired down there. Most of the people that work with me now at DynCorp indicate it's also retarded as well. So you have to expect that and accept that. Maslow's hierarchy of needs applies. If you've never remembered your psychological, physiological training from years ago and far away, Maslow came up with this hierarchy of need, as he says it. The ones that really are the most pressing are the ones you see down at the bottom. Until you get past the absolute physical need, food, water, shelter, clothing, no one even thinks about the needs ahead of that. Once they have been satisfied to an adequate degree, then they don't think about that need anymore, they move to the next. I would submit to you that in most locations in today's environment that we operate, Liberia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, you don't get beyond the first two. And most government agencies, be that international as well as national, do not understand how you precisely identify what the issues are. Let me give you what has served me well from the time that Major Chuck Mahan, working for the country team in Bogota, Colombia, was flown down on a wonderful Connie 440. Does anybody here even know what the heck that is? A Constellation 440 that had wooden seats that you pull down off the side, set on. There were no safety seats. A friend of mine was the pilot from the Colombian Armed Forces, Air Force, and brought me up to be in the navigator's chair, which was an office chair on wheels. But at least I got to see exactly what we were flying through. Once I arrived at Popayan, which was the recipient of a 6.4 on the Richter scale earthquake, beautiful, beautiful town, one of the oldest and one of the best known in Colombia for being a university town, absolutely gorgeous town, flattened. The ambassador said to me, "Chuck, you're going to be the disaster relief officer." Good old Tom Boyott. I'll never forget him. Perhaps you've run into him. Bob, I don't know. But interesting guy, a great poker player too. But he absolutely understood the need to get there in a hurry. And I will take you through the process that not only served us there, but Hurricane Andrew, when I was down there, I got to play in that. Desert Shield, Desert Storm. While it wasn't a man-made, well, it was a man-made disaster, ultimately, perhaps. One can see that whether it's man-made or a natural disaster, the same applications, the same processes, the same thought processes have to take place. But it applies. Whether we're going to wildfire fighting, shades of California, or in the Northwest where the Army used to go all the time when I was at Fort Lewis, Washington, and certainly in current operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. So these apply. Next slide, please. But the process is, what happened? What can I gain in terms of intelligence? Humans and infrastructure are going to be affected. What? Who has authority to allocate resources? That's always an interesting one. And there's a lot of debate on that. I think you will hear more, or you probably already have heard more. What capabilities are there to mitigate the effects and the outcomes? And then once you have all of that, you start attacking the problems. Which ones? Well, I'll go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Which ones are the absolutely most critical and essential? And I include here triage, medical triage. Certainly treatment. I saw evacuation. If I don't stop the bleeding, if I can't clear the airway, going back to my old time as a battle buddy, I would suggest it doesn't matter if you got plenty of food and water, they're going to die. And so what are elements available to them, and where are they? How quickly can they respond to this incident, or this series of incidents, to this, if you will, full-blown disaster? And finally, when in doubt, do what's right, every time. We did that as a military. I like to think we at DynCorp does that today, where we are involved in many of these kinds of activities. Next slide, please. Now, what happened? There's ways, and I would suggest to you that, that as we look at the ways that you say, technical experts, tell me what happened. What happened to the infrastructure? What happened to the lines of communication? What happened to communication capability per se? What happened to the people on the ground? How big is that? And understanding by calling in, here in the United States, we go to the first responders. Who do you go to in Liberia? Who do you go to in Popayan? I can tell you who I did. I went to the local police, La Policía. Then I had to go to, obviously, El Ejército de Colombia, the Colombian Army. I had to go to the Red Cross that was already there. I had to go to many of the other individuals as we did that. And then say, how bad is that situation? What can we do to make it better? Again, from the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy up. Was it a natural or a man-made disaster? How you treat it, how you approach it, is going to be far different, one versus the other. Because if it's man-made, normally they will continue to try to create disaster. Chaos. If you look at what's going on in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's what they're there for. The terrorists, the enemy, are not your competitors in case, as my friend says. I think it's the enemy, really the enemy. And then they have a vote. You can make the best plans, giving all the resources and capabilities that you have, and as we used to say, best plan goes out the window when the first shot is fired. Well, it can also happen when the next tremor occurs, or when the next rain occurs. In Popayan, because we lost so many houses, the most important asset there was blue plastic tarp. Why? Because it protects the family from absolute destruction. Their house melts when you don't have a roof, because most of it's made with adobe brick. And oh, by the by, everything inside their house becomes waterlogged and becomes virtually unusable. They can't stay warm, they can't cook, they can't do the things that are necessary to survive as a family. And so the same things can occur wherever you are. What is the most essential element? I've been in locations where it was vegetable oil, where they couldn't cook. I've been in New York City, it's power. So depending upon which one, it's never going to be the same, but you can always imagine and you can always ascertain what are those key and essential elements that will have the greatest impact. Again, to be able to provide the most basic needs first, and then moving up the hierarchy as quickly as possible. And then regional, military, political considerations in play. Because if they are, they can be helpful or it can be hurtful. We already see the hurtful side in terms of other interests in the Middle East in our current operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. It can be very helpful in terms of other governmental and international aid agencies, which we can depend upon for assistance, support, and cooperation and collaboration.